And the whole idea is simply this. Instead of saying, my product does this, my service does that, blah, 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 say, my product does this, but if you do it this way, you can get this result. Therefore, this can happen. It's really that simple.
What's up, agency owners? Jason Swenk here with another episode of the Smart Agency Masterclass, a podcast for the agency owner that wants to scale and grow faster and get the latest strategies that they can actually go execute and hear the stories from amazing people. And on today's episode, we're going to be chatting about telling the right business story and how to tell better business stories so your business can grow a lot faster. It's going to be really good. We're going to go through a couple frameworks. So let's go ahead and jump into the show. Hey, Douglas, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, thanks for having me.
Oh, cool. So tell us who you are and what do you do?
Awesome. I'm Douglas Hatcher. I've got a company called Communicate for Impact, and it's a firm that my wife and I started about 6 years ago. And what we do basically is train people and coach people in the art and science of business storytelling. And the premise of the business couldn't be simpler. All we do is help business leaders take what they do naturally, which is tell stories, and then we help them apply it to what they do professionally. And the result is better communication that's more effective, it's more memorable, and it's just easier for people to use and for people to understand.
Tell us kind of how, you have an interesting story kind of being in Washington, D.C. And so tell us a little bit about, how you kind of got into this.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I kind of fell into it by accident. I was a speechwriter for a long time. I was a speechwriter on Capitol Hill for congressmen, but also for a United States senator from Maine. I did that for most of my career. And the senator I was working for retired. I had to get a new job. And I landed at MasterCard, where I was the speechwriter for the CEO. And through doing that work, a lot of people would come to me for help with their presentations, their pitch decks, their PowerPoints. And I had one executive come and say, hey, my team does a really great job with data, but they do a really crappy job when it comes to storytelling. Can you help me? And when we think of storytelling, we sort of think we know what that is. I went ahead and just Googled it before I said yes to this executive. I Googled the words business storytelling because I wasn't really sure what he meant. And out came people like Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and a bunch of other people. And I learned it was actually a craft to writing a storytelling in a business context. So I was able to help this executive with the PowerPoint that he wanted some help with. But not only that, I developed a 2-hour course for the company on the art and science of business storytelling. So that took off. I had no idea how popular it would be. So when I had a chance to start my own company, I decided, okay, I am going to go do business storytelling for a living and teach people how to do it. And my wife and I have been doing that for the past 6 years.
Awesome. So let's kind of talk about Steve Jobs and Richard Branson. What makes them good storytellers?
Wow, that's a great question. First of all, they care about it. They care about how to communicate in an effective way. Not everyone puts communication sort of ahead of everything else in the business. Your numbers matter, your financials matter, your analytics matter, your data matters. All that stuff does matter. But at the end of the day, if your audience is not understanding what you're putting across, you're going to be in a tough place. Steve Jobs, when he first started, there's a great clip where he is, I think if it wasn't his first TV interview, it was right up there. He basically said, it was so bad. He was like, I told the camera guy, listen, I need a minute. I've got to go throw up. I've got to go to the bathroom. I've got to go throw up. It was that bad. From that point on, he began to really develop into a great communicator, but it didn't start out that way. Steve Jobs would spend 30 hours for every slide for a major launch, like whether it was the iPod or the iPhone. The main thing that separates guys like him and Richard Branson is that they care enough to really put in the effort to reach people and to connect with them.
Well, I think too, when I would look at Steve Jobs' presentation, that he would go for the iPhone or the iPad, he wasn't selling like, this is how fast my processor is. Like if you looked at like a Microsoft presentation and it was just all on the tech versus, Steve was talking more about what's the benefit for the people that are going to be using this and how, and I've watched so many videos of Steve over the years, and even had the head of Apple.com actually work for us many, many years ago. And he used to tell us all kinds of Steve Jobs stories, which came out of the movie, which was kind of pretty funny. I was like, oh, he was telling the truth. Like, who would park in a handicap spot? Who would fire people? And I was like, oh, like, I thought he was just, being the positive person he was. But like, he would always think about how do you elevate someone with the products that we do. And he always told great stories. Like, I loved his slides, right? Like his slides were just like one word or pitch.
Yes. Yeah. Well, like if you go back to, to the iPod, for example, everyone knows this, but it's worth repeating. Instead of saying that, the iPod was the latest and greatest MP3 player, he said it was 1,000 songs in your pocket. And so to your point, I mean, again, it's sort of cliche. We all know that story, but let's remember that he's putting it in the context that the customer is going to care about. I can carry my entire music library around in my pocket, which is very different from saying it holds this much gigabytes. It holds this much memory. I mean, all that stuff's important, but he was a master of saying, don't tell me what my product does. Tell me what my product can do for you. And that's the essence of storytelling. And, people forget this. They need to be reminded of it. And that's really all we're trying to do is basically remind people of how to tell a story.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit on the pre-show about one of the frameworks that I really liked when you were kind of explaining at high level. Why don't we kind of dive into that about, for the listeners?
Excellent. So we teach 3 frameworks, and the one that I think we'll focus on here first is called and, but, therefore. It's the 3-word vocabulary you need to tell a good story. And there are a couple of people I always cite because we didn't create this, but there's a scientist turned filmmaker named Randy Olson. He didn't create it either, but he really popularized it. So I want to make sure to give him a shout out. Let me tell you, a group that uses this all the time, and it's really, really amazing. The creators of South Park, they're the guys, we use this in our course. They're the ones who talk about this and, but, therefore construct. And the whole idea is simply this. Instead of saying, my product does this, my service does that, blah, 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 say, my product does this, but if you do it this way, you can get this result, therefore, this can happen. It's really that simple. But to hear the South Park guys use it, they use this all the time. And each one of these different parts of the construct is a beat. So the and is sort of the way things are, the current state of things. The but is the turn or the change. And then the therefore is the outcome or the resolution. And that is storytelling in microcosm.
Yeah, I love it. I just think of when I think of South Park, I think of Timmy.
Yeah, it's so funny that, the secret to storytelling is change. If you don't have anything changing or a person changing or the customer changing, then you don't have a story. And, in business, if you're not in the business of solving a problem, helping a customer change from a place of this stinks to a place of this is much better, then that's not what you want. You want to be in a position to help people, change something for the better, and that's where storytelling comes in.
It's I was telling someone on our mastery calls a little while ago, they're looking for a salesperson because their salespeople have been kind of crap. And I said, well, was it the salespeople or was it what you gave them? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what separates you from a salesperson is stories. You can relate stories and articulate in a different way. And so what I told them was, if you can create a library of stories that you already have mentally in your brain, put them on paper, put them somewhere else, or communicate them to the salesperson, they will actually be a lot better than you because they're better at sales. They just don't know the stories. And then they'll start drafting their own stories on top. And that will allow you to free up you never having to do that ever again, because you shouldn't be doing sales.
Yeah, that's a good point. The idea of having a library is a great idea. Everyone should really, aspire to do that.
Tell us about a couple other frameworks that can help us out.
Sure. So the next one we use, again, is super, super simple. It's called What, So What, Now What? And it's a similar construct where the what is sort of the thing you want to talk about. The so what is why do we care? The now what is what's next. We use an example in our course of a film director, and I'm not going to say his name, but he was at a really famous, I'll say electronic show, it sort of gives it away, but electronic show a few years ago in Las Vegas. Anyway, the teleprompter kind of went out. So he's in the middle of like a stand-up fireside chat. And this guy's a great director, and he's a great guy and a great communicator. But the teleprompter went out, and he was unable to recover, and he walked off the stage. Yeah, it's like that.
Wow.
And so we have an exercise where we say, let's try and keep him on stage. And we try to keep him on stage by giving you this 3-word deal of what, so what, now what. So when someone asks you a question, if you can't come up with an answer quickly, you can just simply repeat the question. You can always repeat the question. You can say, hey, Jason, this is a really great question. You're right. Storytelling is so important. And then the next thing is, that's the what, the so what. We know why it's important. It's important because people need to feel a connection. And when they feel a connection, they're more likely to trust you, and they're more likely to engage with you, and they're more likely to buy from you. That's what, so what, now what. Super simple, but if you have that in your back pocket, you might not walk off the stage.
And that's embarrassing.
You know what? Guess what? But we've all done it. We haven't walked off the stage per se, but we've all had that moment of anxiety where we just kind of tank. And our goal, certainly with that particular framework, is to keep you from tanking. I tell people way, way back in the day, Ted Kennedy was on an interview on 60 Minutes with a guy named Roger Mudd. And Roger Mudd said, why do you want to be president? Ted Kennedy hadn't announced for president, wasn't going to announce for president at the time, but instead of kind of coming up with a thoughtful answer, he just went, and you know what? He did eventually run, and he eventually lost. I mean, again, I'm not saying the what, so what, now what can save you every time, but why not have that in your back pocket just in case?
Well, and especially if you want to be president.
Yes.
I'm not going to stop you from being president in that one.
The third framework we teach is one that I think more people are apt to know. It's something called the Pixar Framework. And it goes like this. It's once upon a time and every day until one day. Because of that, until finally. It sounds like, well, how can that possibly work in a business context? Once upon a time, again, is the current state, the way things are. And every day, that's the problem that your customer is facing. Until one day, that's when you come into the picture with your solution. Because of that, that's the first benefit. Because of that, that's the second benefit. Until finally, that's the resolution. It's amazing how effective this construct can be. And what's also amazing is you don't come into the picture until the third chunk. You come in, not at the beginning where the way things are, not at the second part, the problem your customer's facing. You come in the third part with your solution. And that's one of the big things that I love talking about with people is the importance of putting your audience first and putting yourself in the position of being the guide or the mentor. Make your audience the hero. Give your customer the cape, but put yourself in the Obi-Wan Kenobi role of being the helper.
Yeah, because if you make yourself Superman or Fat Man, you're going to make them Robin, wear those ugly ass green tights. And
that's right.
I use that example a lot when I was speaking back in the day. And I'd be like, who wants to dress up as Robin as Halloween? And then there was like one dude's like, I dress up as Robin. I'm like, okay, like no judge. There's people, only one. And so there you go. You're the outlier. Give us a more of an example, like in business, of this particular framework, kind of like in use.
Sure. So if you are going to give a sales presentation, it could be internal, it could be external. You're talking about a particular product. You'll want to talk about what's the current environment where this product or service is living, and talk about that for a sentence or two. And then you want to say, okay, whoever the customer is that's going to be using this product, what's the problem that they're facing? What's the problem that you're solving for? So you've got the current state of things, whatever that current world is for this product, then you've got the problem that you're trying to solve. And then you come in with your solution. I'm trying to think of something more specific here for your viewers. You deal with agencies, right? You've got this great mastermind with agencies. So let's think of a problem that most agencies have. I don't know if it's keeping their too busy. Okay, great, time. All right, so they live in a world where they're pulled. I don't know how many people they might have on their team, but they're pulled in lots of different directions. They've got lots of different priorities. That's the current state. The problem is, in that current state, it's hard to figure out what to focus on, especially if you're the CEO of this agency and you're trying to prioritize, not only what should your team be focused on, but what should be your primary focus. This is where if you come to someone like, you, Jason, to get some help in a mastermind, you guys are going to help them think through what's that process look like for figuring out where your energies and your intellect should be spent. That's the solution. And once you do that, what's the benefit? Well, the benefit is you might not be micromanaging other people as much because you're focused on the one thing you should be doing. That's benefit number one. Benefit number two is you're able to align everybody else around your vision because there's one thing that you're focused on. And as a result of all of that, you probably have a more streamlined organization and more streamlined process where you're able to make more money. So that's sort of a way to kind of outline it.
I love it. I really love these frameworks, and people listen to them, and they're so simple. But the things that are so simple are the ones that, like you were saying, took the longest time in order to come up with. It's like you were saying, Steve Jobs spent 30 hours on a slide.
Yes.
You look at it and going, oh, the experts or the people that really put the work into it, they make it look easy. But it wasn't easy coming up with it. But I love the frameworks. I think that will give a lot of people an advantage going forward. So thank you so much for sharing this. What's the website people can go and check you guys out?
So come to communicate4impact.com. And if you come there, you will also see a product called Story Quotient, where all the frameworks we just discussed, instead of having to learn them yourself, we have put them into an AI prompt where you're able to plug in with our help. You can't automate it, but you're able to plug in something that you want to get some help with in terms of your own storytelling, and it will spit it out for you.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. And for all of you guys listening, if we just put out a free masterclass on converting more, building the right sales team, what to pay them, how to close a deal a lot quicker. It's a total free masterclass. If you go to agencymastery360.com/convert, you can get the masterclass for free. And until next time, how to Swenk it.